Hello, good evening. Welcome to the Upset Podcast. Tonight we're talking about domestic violence. Coming up next. Hello, hello. Welcome back to the Upset Podcast. We're so happy that you chose to spend your Sunday evening with us. And when I say us, who am I talking about? Who's here with us tonight? These great people. Hey, everybody.
Hey there.
Hello to all my friends,
Yes.
especially all the ones I meet. Hello.
I know, right? I love our Upset family out there. You guys make it worth it every week to come here. So what's new? As a lot has been happening in our world, hasn't it?
A lot has been happening in our world.
Well, divert from the major news cycle that we all experienced this week. Quite frankly, I don't even want to give any airtime to that issue, if you know what I mean. The person's name begins with a T, so we'll move on. I have a couple of radar stories or inserts that I want to share with everybody. I think we missed the opportunity to talk about Asian American Month because the last month it was Asian American. And if you deep dive into that recognition, you'll find that Asian Americans throughout the history have been victims of a lot of the same things that African Americans have gone through. Same discrimination, same issues with social justice, so forth and so on. And I thought it was interesting that in peeling back that story, as you all know from history, you probably, all of us have learned this in history, that really the Chinese were the ones who built our railroad from coast to coast. And yet when they celebrated the creation of that railroad and celebrated the completion, and they took a big, this big picture for the newspaper, not a single Asian American was in the photograph.
Wow.
And yet they built they built the thing. They weren't invited to be in the celebratory photograph. I thought that was interesting. Very indicative of America. The second thing I wanted to share with you, I really thought it was interesting because I'm so bad in math. When I was growing up, math was my worst subject.
Really?
Yes. And in high school, I had a great math teacher because she would give us extra points if the football team would win. So in order for you to get extra points on your math tests and your math, she wanted you to be at the field to watch the team play. And if they won, everybody in the class would get extra, points on their math score. That was great for me because I was terrible in math. But it leads to this story about a math teacher in Texas uses TikTok to teach math. Her name is Deidre Kelly, and her TikTok channel is Mrs. Kelly. And she's got over 1.5 million subscribers.
Wow.
These kids are...
What level of math is she?
High school, middle school.
Okay.
Math, and thousands and tens of thousands of kids have latched on to her channel. She's a teacher in educator in Texas, and she has a very entertaining way of teaching math on TikTok. Now, this is kind of a double story. You know what the current administration is trying to do with TikTok, okay? But here's a good, positive story. There's a lot of junk on TikTok, that, but this is a very positive and effective story. You've got an educator, African-American woman in Texas, got more than 1.5 million not views, but subscribers for teaching math. And the testimony from the kids, look it up. I think NBC News did a story on it. Look it up. The kids are so excited to go to her channel and learn math. So I thought that was a really, good.
I wrote it down for my teens.
Yeah, right.
So thanks for sharing that. But speaking of TikTok, I'm a big fan of documentaries, and I don't know if you guys have seen one of the new releases on Netflix called Dancing with the Devil. It's about this TikTok cult. And I thought it was interesting because we just, had a recent discussion on what cults were. And evidently there is this leader who's leading this church called Shekinah. But simultaneously, he's also managing a company, I think it's called 7M, where he manages TikTok dancers. So the whole thing, you guys have to check it out on Netflix, but the whole documentary was centered around this family whose daughter, there were two sisters. One of the sisters got caught up in this cult where they actually live there with a guy, and he takes their money. But he does it under this spiritual hold, as most cults do. And I was listening to that. I said, now this is cult,
this is a cult.
Because you're distancing people from their families.
Yeah.
And you're making sure that they feel tied to you. So they're literally giving him 80% of the income that they earn.
Wow.
It's crazy. But it's an interesting documentary. Of course, everything's like speculation, but there's some pretty interesting facts that come up in that documentary. So for those who are looking for a good one to check out, that's my.
I have another recommendation as well.
We need a preaching cult.
Yeah. Oh Lord.
Put Tally in charge of it.
We already have that. No.
I recently just finished the Ashley Madison documentary on Netflix.
I saw that one too. Yeah,
what was that again, Miguel? Which one was that?
Don't worry about it, Marlena. Don't worry about it. Won't even.
I got to try another one tonight.
No.
For those who may not know, Ashley Madison was actually still a company that promotes cheating,
which is weird.
It promotes
married
couples. Married couples to have a meeting, a marketplace for them to safely and securely cheat. And it talks about the rise and fall of that company. It goes into their leadership and the culture and some of the fallout from the massive hack that they had in 2015, which led, unfortunately, to some people taking their own lives.
Yep.
Wow.
But there was a Christian, I guess, early social media couple. They were YouTubers. And the husband was on, and they talk about all of the changes that happened once the news broke, and he goes into such deep details, and all the things that he had to do just to restore their marriage. And it was so insightful, and it was a global company. They were in multiple markets, and I think it's a great conversation to have, at some point in time. As it pertains to cheating and marriage and sexual desires and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'm sure we're the upset.
What's your username, Mix?
And what were they teaching to cheat on? Anything? Or academic?
This is cheating with someone, like romantic.
A cheat.
Romantic
okay.
Yeah,
I got
everybody on the site is married, and But it was an interesting documentary, and how even looking at it from a crisis management standpoint in terms of how they tried to, once the breach happened and all of that stuff.
It was the credit card. They got in, they hacked it, and they not only had the credit cards, but they had everyone. People put their real names in it. That's how secure it was supposed to be.
They released the list of it.
Yep. And they released the list out there. And of course, people looking through it. I mean, the millions of names.
Oh, my goodness.
Who's on there? I said, stop. I said, Meg. So I stopped, go down. GP. I went all the way back up to C. I caught Chuck, so.
You said
that's what it was like happening.
Line, right?
But there was also there's some real stories that wasn't in there of people who were, I'll take your name off the list if you gave 10 grand or if you take 15 grand or etc. Or it should be able to,
yeah. There was a radio station. It was a radio station in Australia. They were allowing callers to call in, and they would tell them if their spouse, their name was on the list, live on the radio. So I mean, yeah, it was a very messy situation.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Tally's recommending a book from Dr. Esther Perez.
Yeah.
Work on extramarital relations is groundbreaking.
Okay.
I think.
Awesome.
All right. Yeah, so I guess we've shared a couple of documentaries. I hesitate to say, yeah, check it out after this, but
there's a documentary on the fall of Diddy. Did anybody see that?
I did see that.
Yeah.
On,
is it on Tubi?
But it was a TMZ.
Yeah, I don't think TMZ put it out. It's not.
Yeah.
Because Tubi, we could make a movie on Tubi. Just handheld,
Yeah, we could literally upload this episode of the Tubi tomorrow.
Y'all leave Tubi alone.
Tubi's making money.
Tubi,
too bad.
Great artists right now, right?
The edit mistakes are hilarious, though. The edit, they're killing this guy in a red shirt, and he comes back in the black shirt.
Real low budget, right? Low budget.
Yeah.
Listen, we all got to have a starting place, okay? For some of us, we started preaching at prayer meeting. We moved to AY. You got to work your way to the pulpit, okay? You got to work your way up there.
Makes some of the Wednesday night prayer meetings are better than the 11 o'clock worship hour.
That's the truth.
And evening vespers.
Should have saved this one. Yeah, you're right.
Mercy. But yeah,
some of those preachers who did sermons on the way to church. How in the world?
Let's go on. What are we talking about today?
I'm calling out Pat. And the red light. Give me 3 points, Jesus. 3 points.
But no, that's funny though, because I did see someone, I don't know, somewhere on my social media this week, someone asked if people are using ChatGPT to write sermons as though they had just thought of it. And people were like, yes, of course. Doing this since it started. So it's a thing.
Yeah. I can't figure that out, but more power to
it. It's true, though. It's true. They are. And
yeah,
I've tried it, but it doesn't. No, when I say I tried it, I tried it. Yeah, but it's not in my voice.
Get some idea.
I'll be like, nah, Pat, you ain't that intelligent. Don't play yourself.
Yeah. I was about to say they got Tally writing for them because this is where I said, what's that word? Tally is
now we know what you're doing. Right. All right, time to transition to our topic this evening. And I do want to start off by saying that, I shared that we will be talking about domestic violence this evening. And so, if this is triggering for anyone, we want to make sure you're aware. We want to be sensitive to that. But with everything happening in the media right now, this is one of the topics I think you guys remember. We said we're not just going to cover when it's Domestic Violence Awareness Month. It's something that we wanted to bring and shine a light to more than just once a year. And so we're attempting to do that this evening. Help us out.
Well, first and foremost, I want to recognize those that are survivors or those who are currently in domestic violence situations. While we are trying to, and it's the nature for a lot of us here to be jovial, it is a serious matter. And it's okay if this conversation triggers you to walk away. We understand. We still love you. We're praying for you and your recovery, your healing, and your well-being. So, if you've been attached to any sort of internet over the last month, if you've watched the news, if you were at a barbershop, it's hard to avoid the topic of Diddy. It seems like he's a reoccurring name for the last maybe 6 months. This last situation did spark a lot of conversations about Diddy. I want to start here because I think it's very critical that we also acknowledge not just Cassie, but Diddy has a long history of abuse. The issue we've had is we don't see men as victims of abuse sometimes by the hands of other men, and we don't see musical artists or workers as victims of abuse from their bosses. I can remember when the Locks went on Hot 97 in the 90s, for those hip hop heads, trying to force Diddy's hands to get out of the contract. He's had the same issue with Mace. Shine has been on the record for saying that it was not him that shot that woman at that club where J Lo and Diddy were. That he was the fall guy. Diddy has a long history, and there are plenty of artists to his abuse. Now, for the sake of this conversation, I want to keep it thematic somewhat, so we can have multiple points of conversation. I did look up the traits, some of the top traits of a narcissist, and I'm sure there's an expansive list, but I wanted to keep it condensed. And there are 5 main traits. And for me, I was able to identify 3 in a possible that Diddy has demonstrated publicly. That doesn't mean that he doesn't have all these things, but I want to make sure that I'm also fair somewhat. I don't know how he is behind closed doors. We can only understand him through the prisms of those closest to him and what we've seen publicly.
Say, Mix, can I interrupt you just for a second?
Yes.
Can you expound a little bit on who Diggs is and what this? Because you mentioned his story, and because there are some people who don't know Diddy about Diddy. They just don't know what you're talking about.
I apologize. So Sean Combs is his government name. His name in music, or his performance name, was Puff Daddy. It turned into P. Diddy, Diddy for short. He's a music exec. He owned his own label, Bad Boys Record, from the late 80s, 90s. He's had multiple iterations of that. He was I don't know if he was a part owner or he was sponsored by a brand that nobody on this live should know personally, called Ciroc. Okay. He was an owner. He was an owner of Revolt TV.
Calm in the day.
Yeah, I was talking to Pat about that the other day.
That is for confessional time, okay?
Coming to my booth later, right?
Yeah.
He owned Revolt TV, which was a major network for a long time, amongst other things. I mean, he was listed as a billionaire just a few short years ago. One of the few hip hop based billionaires. I think there are only 3, or the list, it fluctuates. I think there's maybe 3 or 4 that were on that list, and P. Diddy, Sean Combs. We could talk about all the clothing that he's done. He's done a lot of business. Yeah, he's done a lot of business. Yes,
mogul, as they say.
Yeah, he was a mogul in our industry. We're talking about TV shows and a lot. He's done a lot. He was a part of Barack Obama's election, the first one. He was a part of that movement. Go out and vote. This is early 2000s. So he's been in our culture. He's been a major figure for almost 30 years now. Right, a very prominent figure. He was the one behind Biggie. He was Biggie's record label exec. So he's been a part of our culture, and I say our, I mean hip hop culture, Black culture, whatever you want to identify it as, for a long time. And so when the news broke, for a lot of people, there was a lot of shock. There's also been some rumors about some of his dealings in the shadows. And these last few months, it's a lot of stuff has been confirmed, and a lot of stuff have come to light, reshaped how we've viewed this prominent figure. So with that said, I want to hop into the five major characteristics of a narcissist. First and foremost, grandiose or perfectionism. And these are male narcissists. I want to be very specific because it does show up differently in men and women. So male narcissists often display grandiose behaviors characterized by an exaggerated sense of self-importance and a constant need for admiration. They might frequently talk about their achievements and talent, often at the expense of others. They also set unrealistic expectations for perfection in others while not holding themselves to the same standards. That's the possible for me. I remember when Diddy forced his group mates to walk from Manhattan to Brooklyn for a piece of cheesecake. I don't know why Pat's covering his camera, but
He's in Brooklyn.
So Diddy has been known to be grandiose. I just don't know how it shows up in his personal relationships. I'm not sure, but that is a possibility. Another characteristic: control and manipulation. Narcissistic men tend to have control issues, seeking to manage every aspect of their environment to protect their fragile self-esteem. Now, in this Cassie situation, Cassie was 19 when she signed with Diddy, which means Diddy wasn't just her boyfriend, he was her boss. She signed a record deal 2007. The deal was for 10 albums. 10 albums. For point of reference, the only artist that I know of, major artist that I know of, that's released 10 albums,
that's Mike.
One of them is LL Cool J.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Now, LL Cool J, it took him, I think it was 17 years from his initial release to his final release to get to 10 albums. He signed her to 10 albums at age 19. Yeah. Okay. So we can see some of those elements there. And at that point in time, she's 19, he's 38. He's been in the game for almost 20 years by the time he comes across, Cassie. All right. So she has unless that deal has been, destroyed or, they found some legal loophole, she can't put out her own music. Diddy legally owns the rights to her music, right? Aggression and risk-taking. Research indicates that male narcissists can exhibit aggressive behaviors, particularly when they perceive a threat to their self-esteem. We saw I don't know if everyone saw the video, and I would caution those who have experienced abuse to maybe pray about watching that video. It's very explicit. We saw her, being punched, being kicked, being dragged, items thrown in a lobby, in a very public place, right?
Yeah.
Which means that he was comfortable in doing that. So only God knows what happens behind closed doors. And she does detail a lot of this stuff in her first lawsuit.
And this was from what year, Miguel? Just so people have the video.
I think it was 2017.
Okay.
Or 2016, somewhere in there.
Just even the amount of time between when it happened and when it's being shared.
Correct.
It shows you that there's some level of control behind the scenes. Yes. And I'm sure,
Yeah, so it's alleged that he paid someone $50,000 to receive that tape. And it's believed that the raid on his home, I think a month ago, the government now has it, and they might have been the ones to have released that footage. I want to read a quote from Diddy's quote from 2022 when he received the Lifetime Achievement Award, right? With that image of the abuse that we saw from 2017, 2016, just remember that as I read this quote. I was in a dark place for a few years. I got to give a special thank you to the people that was really for me. Diddy listed his friends and advisors, and looking directly, and this is from the Rolling Stones article on him, then looking directly into the camera, he added, Cassie, for holding me down in the dark times, love. Diddy's acceptance speech in 2022 for a Lifetime Achievement Award. This is 4 years after their breakup and 6 years after the recently released video. So even in a very public place, he felt comfortable knowing what he did to Cassie to kind of taunt her publicly in this moment. Right. So that's a level of aggression and control that we see him having. So fourth one is attention seeking and abusive. I think that's more self-explanatory. And then the last one is an interesting one. Age-related changes. So male narcissists, when they're young, are more volatile. As they age, they learn how to adapt and to hide some of those volatile characteristics and change and become more
charismatic, probably
more charismatic. They're kind of smoother with their with how they
charm.
Yes, they're more charming, and we see some of those things as it pertains to Diddy, because his public persona is this happy-go-lucky, do well. He actually, his last iteration after Puff Daddy, P Diddy, he was just coming out recently, trying to change his name to Love. Oh, now I want to add this extra bit. He was also becoming more openly religious. He was partnering up with TD Jakes. He was, at his church. He was talking about God more openly, more public. He had this persona of someone who was warm and caring. And we saw that evolution, and it's in alignment with this. Now, for some of us who are not as knowledgeable, not as aware, why didn't Cassie report sooner? Why did she wait so long? Right after the relationship has dissolved, after these events that she's listed out in her lawsuit, why does she wait so long? And there's a few different reasons. One, the belief that police won't help. Now, let me backtrack real quick. According to the data on RAINN, RAINN, 2/3 of sexual abuse goes unreported by women. 2/3.
That's significant.
Okay, that's a huge number there. There's a fear of retaliation, belief that police won't help. There's personal matters. There's embarrassment and humiliation. What will people think of me if I were to come out and say X, Y, and Z did, whatever. There's doubt about the importance of reporting. So there's a minimizing of what happened. And then finally, there's an emotional and psychological impact. Now, this is just data until it shows up at our front door. Now, I want to just spend a few moments to kind of paint a picture and to create a profile here, if you will, right? What happens when Cassie isn't a musical artist, an R&B artist, but rather she's your praise team leader, married to the charismatic, benevolent, wealthy individual man, handsome individual who's been in the church for 20, 30 years. Everyone loves him. Everyone wants to be around him. He's the fun guy. What happens when it's no longer P. Diddy, but it's Deacon Diddy or the preacher Puffy, who's in our churches, and we catch wind that that praise team Cassie, who's singing and she's talented, may be abused, do we allow space for forgiveness and reconciliation? Do we tell Cassie that she should forgive her husband? Should he cry and repent? And should we send them home knowing that oh yeah, in Christ we are all new creatures? What should we do as a church? And I'm opening up this to discussion here when we have these individuals in our midst.
One of the things I think is our first instinct, particularly if the accused is a likable person. Usually the first instinct is to say, "Oh, why would she say something like that about?" There's a judgment set from the beginning in terms of, if it's somebody that is known to be aggressive to other people are more likely to believe you. But if it's somebody that is, as we talked about, very charismatic, very nice to everyone else, very warm and inviting, you hear those and you often look at the accuser as though they're trying to malign this person's good name. And I think the first thing is to remain neutral in our thoughts regarding the situation. Meaning, because if we don't, we tend to not take the next steps because we don't even believe that what the person is saying has any merit. And I think everybody, and of course, we know that there are some times when people are falsely accused of things, and sometimes that does jade us. But I do think we can't take that chance of not taking the proper steps. And I'm not talking about the steps right now. I'm sure we will. But I just want us to, at that moment when it's brought to our attention as a church or a church member, to not go right into judgment based on our relationship with the person, whether it's true or not. I think that is the first step that we could do better with as a church.
Let me just start off by saying, again, I apologize to the families that have ever come to me in the past and have said to me this, that, and the other. I don't even want to line it up on what it is, but it's, of course, on the same domestic violence and both ways. You heard what I just say? Team, both ways. I've had men who are like, she's beating me up. I mean, black eye, whatever the case may be for the male, and big dudes too. We're not talking about one who's not going to hit back or et cetera, et cetera. And in the first thing in the back of my mind, young pastor, is, Negro, please, are you serious? Not even having the heart to say, man, he's going through something, right? And I could remember at least once or twice early in ministry saying, pray about it. Wow, you'll make it through. And you also have to understand, we've seen some of these things in our own families where they've made it. You know what I mean? They've made it through their marriages, and they made it. When I say made it, I'm talking about time, as far as time is concerned, which is something else. So I want to start off by saying, first of all, that we have to be active listeners, and it's a discipline to be a listener. It's not that easy to listen to something without reacting right away, or A-type personalities, pastors, even elders, et cetera, et cetera. We have the tendency of wanting to answer before they're even done. Do you understand what I'm saying? So and I really want to put that out as an apology, because I know better now. And I know we're going to talk about it after, but the abuse is heavy in churches, and it's covered up in the niceties, and it's covered up in the titles, can't be this person. And if you want to flip that back from church to Diddy, for those of us who wanted to be producers back in the day, when you're coming out of the late 80s, 90s, everybody was on the hip hop corridor. And if it wasn't on the hip hop corridor, you were on the R&B corridor, because he was we all wanted to be like him. Not the West Coast guys, but the East Coast guys, right? And so this still comes as a shock when you actually see it happen. That we do have those things going on at church, in our churches, in our families, in our fraternities, in our sororities. You can go stretch. Even though we're a church group, we have to be able to know what would be the next step if we heard something like this, without someone saying, which camp are you in? And I think that's one of the parts. Are you on the wife's side or on the husband's side? And then, hold on. Let me just go into one more thing, Migs and family. Let me just say this also. They don't have to be married. Right? Let's remember that. I went to a high school graduation today, and we got to think about it. We got these 19-year-olds and these 18, 19-year-olds who are going through all kinds of abuse. That's not even necessarily physical abuse, but they're going through other kinds of abuse that we really need to be active with. Really do.
Yeah.
I think if any culture needs to have a plan, the church needs to have the plan.
Right.
We hide behind our religion and our niceties and our kindness.
Sure.
This is a serious matter. People will not report because of all the coding of our religiosity. But if anyone should have a plan.
You say coding? Oh, wow.
Yeah. It should be the church.
That's right.
Yeah.
There are organizations out there for women who have been abused to go to. They are protected, they're housed, they're fed temporarily so that that individual will be out of the immediate
danger
repercussions of dangerous situations and violence. But unlike the police departments and other agencies that have to deal with the public, the church should have a airtight program to protect its members.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's something we need to seriously, people get into this mindset of, well, it's not my business.
Yep.
But
it's quite frankly, it's everybody's business.
Yep.
Yeah.
All of us.
Cerise brought up this point about, at church, the tendency is we always want to go to God with everything. I mean, and I'm not trying to make that seem like a trite thing. We should go to God with everything. But in the cases of abuse, you can't use this forgive them, turn the other cheek. If they hit you on turn the other. This is taken out of context from what this meant. And I think that's one of the reasons why people don't come to the church to share it, or when they do and they get that type of response, they don't come again because they don't want to be discounted and, as we say, spiritualize our responses to everything. Go ahead, Marlena.
I'm sorry. I thought I heard a pause, but I just want to say it's very important to listen to the victim. Don't you decide if the victim is real or not. Listen to the victim. It takes a lot to share what's happening to you personally. Is when Miggs was saying the embarrassment, the shame. Nobody wants to see things that way or be perceived that way. And so it's important to hear their story. You can't go by what you see. We are excellent actresses and actors, and we perform very well at church, very well. I'm speaking because I am a victim of domestic violence, and me and my husband were in church, and they thought we were one of the best couples. But you never know what's happening in people's houses. I don't care how holy they sing. I don't care how much they shout and pray. You don't know what happens behind closed doors. And so, when we look at society, we are really in a man's world, right? So it's okay for men to cheat. They get excused there. It's okay for men to beat their women, to get them back in line. That's why it's thought, well, did she do something to cause? And so we must know that it's never okay. No woman is to be a person's child. No woman is to be treated that she cannot have a mind, to make decisions. And so we take it way too far. And until it happens to maybe your daughter or somebody that you love closely, people won't see it, right?
Mhm.
And then we use scriptures to make people stay in a bad situation. And I was speaking before, we did
That's
a lot of study on
spiritual abuse.
Yeah.
yes, it is spiritual abuse. And we stay a long time in situations. Some people have been murdered because they stay. Some people, their children, boys often become abusers and girls victims because they're used to seeing one of the parents, live that way. And so they adapt to that living. It's a horrific thing. And our eyes and ears must always be open. And sometimes some of the couples that seem the most loving, I don't know. And that's why when you see people divorce, and they've been married, it's like, I would have never thought this would happen to you guys, is because you never know. So I just want to share, to listen to people, give them support. It takes a lot. It's the threat sometimes of, maybe I won't touch you, but I'm going to kill your mother. I'm going to kill someone in your family, and if you are not independent enough, learn how to drive. Don't depend on somebody driving you around. Learn how to drive, learn how to work and be self-sufficient. You got to learn how, as Cerise said, you got to get out. I mean, I got out when dude went to work. I left, and then I had some co-workers of mine come with me. We packed up that house so quickly, like thing 1 and thing 2 from, you know, packed that place up so quickly. And so you've got to be intelligent. And I think, we as a people, we have to encourage people that safety is first, not a real bad marriage, but safety is first. Because how would you feel if you told someone to stay and then they were murdered? Man.
That's a
Just
now.
want you.
I wanted to thank you, Marlena. That was great that you shared. And thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing your story. And it makes you ask the question, like in terms of what the church, like some tangible or practical things that churches can do. And I liked the question, which I'm using as a suggestion, that Mike Williams had. Do our churches, I'm just going to throw it out to everybody, but of course you guys could answer. Do you have the phone number for your local women's shelter? Because if someone is coming to you and sharing this, are we even equipped to recommend or give them information they need to seek the help that they desire? We talked about this when your pastor's not your therapist, and having, a list of psychologists on hand. I think it's also important to have these resources. And even in our lobbies, some of us are still using those pamphlets and those little amazing facts tracks and all that. Do we have something in the lobby where someone can discreetly grab a brochure with a number on it, or have it visible somewhere in our signage or in our bulletin? These are some of the ways that, because we may never know, they may never tell us, but we should still have a space where they can get help at church. Even if the conversation is never had, they should at least see something in that environment that can help them get the help that they need.
We should cover all the bases. And I would think, in theory, that our churches would have the relationship ministries leader in the church tasked.
I was just about to say
with having those connections.
And
I think we need to be right up front. Yeah, I did read your mind, Pat. I looked through your eyes. I said, I'm going to steal Patrick's. But seriously, though, it's just like when you hear these casinos advertising, come to this casino and, you could win a lot of money. But then at the very end,
gambling,
they'll say, if you have a gambling problem, call 1-800, I can't help it, or something.
Right.
So, it may not be something we want to advertise in our lobbies or on our bulletin boards, but I think we should. I think it should be in bold print in everybody's face, because there's going to be a member who's going to walk by that bulletin board and see that number, that local number, shelter number, or whatever, and end up using it.
I'm glad. I'm just looking at Eleanor's. She's from Berea Temple, and she's talking about that they have something like that in place. You just said, Nick said, oh my goodness, Nick said 1-800, I can't help it. Oh, Chuck, I think it even goes a little bit deeper than just having the phone number.
Oh, absolutely.
I think if you know Miss Johnson, that's there. So when it happens at 2:00 in the morning, they can get there right away based on the community service relationship that you have with each other. It's not just that, but it's to be able to say, hey, I want you to go get an Uber free, whatever the case may be, and get to this place. And when you get there, Mrs. So-and-so or whatever will be there waiting on you. Pastoral work is not just from the pulpit. It's deeper than that. It's knowing who's in your area, who you can tap into right away without having to go through the quick paperwork like everyone else has to go through. So I think that what Eleanor was talking about with Berea Temple, it's something that should be a personal have a personal relationship with some of these agencies.
Yeah. So Anthony Daniels had a question earlier. He said, is there a requirement of church officials to report domestic violence? I also want to ask the question, are pastors in the Seventh-day Adventist Church mandatory reporters?
It's tricky.
Yeah.
Before you answer that,
for child. Oh, go ahead.
Before you answer that, I want to give a scenario that I recently came across. One of Dave Ramsey's people on his network is a therapist. He does a show. People call in and he helps them with their issues. One of which was a wife calling in because her husband was they're all in the church, was reported to have messed around with a child. The church did not report him. And her question was, why I think he's still kind of doing it. Should I leave? And immediately his first response was, why didn't anyone call the cops?
Yeah.
And Pat's about to expound on this, but what should be our protocols when we see these immediate issues?
I don't think we have a choice, Miggs. This is dangerous business. I don't think we have a choice. And I know we're worried about being sued and overstepping your lines and is this something a pastor should do? This is something that any human being should do. Pastor, member, next door neighbor, guy down the street. There needs to be rapid response in situations like this because there have been so many abused that will not speak up for themselves because they're fearful of not having a place to stay, not having food or money. Their children are in the crossfires of all of this. Embarrassment at church or at a society club or at work, threatening to be divorced. All of these things come down on the abused. And we need to be cognizant of those parameters so that we can do a rapid response. Now, what do you say? What do you do when a person says, well, I'm fine. Don't bother. I'm fine. And they're telling you that with a bruised arm and a black eye, bloody lips. I'm fine. Don't worry about it. What do you do? This is what you've seen with your eyes, not what someone's saying, oh, I heard that. You saw this with your own eyes. What do you do?
God, I'm looking it up as we're talking. This took a good twist for us, right? But I'm looking up Maryland, and I'm about to look at all of our territories from New Jersey all the way through. And Maryland is not mandatory. I'm reading it here now. It's not mandatory. Maybe for physicians, pharmacists. But first of all, Chuck, I agree with you that you just should be a good person, a good citizen, and report certain things. But the word mandatory that jumps in right away, our state, I'm talking about state of Maryland, does not currently have training requirements or for domestic violence abuse. Neither do they have it for mandated reporters. I mean, for us to mandate it. They do have it for sexual abuse, but not sexual assault.
Right.
You see how this law thing is.
But no, it's important though. I mean, obviously, if you see someone being abused, they often recommend don't you try to jump in the situation, call 911. I mean, and sometimes that's even hard to do. You see it and you want to intervene, but that can put you in danger and the other person, or it can make the situation even worse if you don't do it properly. Sometimes we come in with our capes and we make matters worse. Because Cerise was saying that it's better to provide the resources and open line of communication so they can make a plan to safely leave. Because if you're doing it because it's happening and the abused person is not in that same headspace, they can actually sabotage plans. You think you're trying to help and you're actually, and I think it's important, because even as we were talking about how do we report and then, looking up, I think it's important to know now, like look it up now, what you should do. Don't wait until a situation happens and you're like, wait, should I call? Should I not call? I mean, because, there's several different recommendations, Pat's referring to the state, Carrie was talking about the fact that the conference says we're mandatory reporters, so it's, I think that's what happens sometimes. We get paralyzed by not knowing what to do, and sometimes we do nothing.
So real quick,
one thing I feel is really important, that the abused, needs to come to the conclusion that they have to leave.
Right.
They have to say, I've got to leave. This is not acceptable living, number one. And then what's partnered with that is being prepared to leave. Because someone will want to leave, but not prepared to leave, so they don't.
Yeah.
I've heard these.
I think it's incumbent upon our churches. This is real hardcore for me because I've had personal family experiences like this. It's imperative that our churches be prepared to take care of its own. Yeah, we have community organizations, we have social services and things like that, but we should be prepared to have a place of safety and solitude and protection for members who are situated in those kind of horrific things, and be able to offer protection and of course prayer and support. But sometimes we're so easy to hand off to a social agency, which in many cases you may have to. But we should have a rapid response for all of our members.
Chuck, I want to add with that is a very dangerous thing now, though, and because the abuser can come and kill up everybody. I mean, that's a common thing, and it's for police is one of the most dangerous calls that they get, domestic violence, because a lot of policemen are murdered during that time. So for someone to take a victim in their home might be a bit much, but if we can get them to a shelter, we get them to the place where they can get help, that's the safest for all of them.
Yeah, I agree with you. And there are a lot of legal ramifications there. But when you get down to a threat and a rapid response, sometimes social agencies and sometimes police officers can't help you. But there might be a member who's willing to take you in, if just for 24 hours, to give you an opportunity to contact the right agencies, to get the right legal response, to get constraining orders. Sometimes there's a need for immediate protection.
I want to ask this question. Thank you, Pastor Talley, for this reminder as well. So Cerise mentioned this earlier, and this is separate from what I'm going to ask. 7 times.
Yes.
It takes at least 7 times for someone to leave that relationship. So my first question is, for those who are new to this, maybe you have a sibling or a friend that's going through an abusive situation, how to be a patient source of safety during that time. And then the second part is, we spend a great deal of time and for good reason speaking to how to be an aid for the abused. what should we do when the abuser is not just a member in our church, but a leader in our church? What should we do in those moments?
You know what's crazy, Megs? As you're saying that, right? My mind is starting to scan, not on people that I know of, but I'm scanning people who I respect.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's hard to do the right thing. I have to say that it's hard to do the right thing. And remember now, when I'm going through all these mandatory reporting through our states, it's only talking about physicians. It's only talking about medical aid. It's only talking about the sheriff or police, etc., which we could talk about for a whole new hour. But it doesn't tell us what we should do as pastors or even teachers. Remember, we're not talking about kids. We're talking about grown people. So I think the hard thing is that we have to be taught. There are classes. We have to be taught. And because people trust the clergy, we ought to be able to have something confidential for them and confidential for the pastor. A lot of pastors getting shot on the pulpit because of this. We've seen it. Oh, you told my wife not to, or you told my husband to leave, or you told, etc. And they come to the church on a Sunday or on Sabbath. Most of them that you see came out of a domestic violence situation. They kill so-and-so at home, then they travel down to the church. We saw a couple of that down south. But I think the biggest thing is that there's some risks that we have to take. Mm-hmm. There's some risks that we have to take in protecting who they are, because self-preservance will say to me, yo, just give them the address and let them go over there. So they won't disrupt my house. They won't be calling, you know what I mean? I don't have to look over my shoulder, et cetera, et cetera. But the responsibility of each man is really to, when I say man, you know what I'm talking about, for each of us, is to look out for each other.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because I'll tell you, I didn't want, I know of a situation that was not dealt with. This is a true situation. And the person went back home. Because remember, I keep thinking Florence Nightingale, but that's not what it is. I think it's Stockholm Syndrome. Am I right? I think it's Stockholm Syndrome, where they kind of fall in love with their captors, or something like, hey, they're not doing anything wrong. They're nice today. They live for the times when they are the best that they could be. But then he turns around and kills her and then shoots himself in front of the kids, right? What guilt that you have to go through because you didn't stop that, and you had the ability, forget stop that, you had the ability to do something about it. The bottom line is that we're trained for kids. We're trained to look out for sexual abuse in kids, or even by what they say. We have first aid in that amongst the pastors, but we don't have any for domestic violence.
Yeah, I feel like the same caution or precaution we take when a child, may bring forth an allegation and there needs to be an investigation, the person is immediately, or should be immediately, removed from post, or until they are able to investigate it. I feel like that's how the church operate. To have a leader still operating, and so they have been. I mean, that's not to place guilt on them. Of course, you want to do, but I do think for the abused to feel believed or heard or seen, they need to know that some action has been taken. And due diligence can take place. I don't know what the due diligence may be, but I just think it's irresponsible of us as a church to have a known abuser in still doing the same thing, performing the same responsibilities.
You guys remember
one thing, didn't the NAD train us? Is it with the Now campaign?
Yeah, end it now.
You end it now, right? And that was strong with domestic violence. I think we probably have to do it annually, but we have had some training to keep our eyes and ears open and report, and to educate the people on being set free. And I liked one of the presenters who was a pastor, and he gave his testimony of his daughter being abused, and he got his daughter out, and he's like, no, this marriage is not going to get any better. Divorce him, right? Because he's not going to change, right? And so I know we can't tell people what to do. We do not tell people what to do, but it's best to connect them. The connections are so important, and I don't care how famous the person is who's abusing. We gotta report that thing.
Meg started off today by actually calling out a mental illness called narcissism. It is a mental illness, right? And the hard part about that is that they say that narcissism you can't change. You cannot change. It's just the way it is, right? And I always say to myself, oh, but the blood of Jesus, if they go to therapy, they basically say that you can't change a narcissistic person, which is hard to say my husband or my wife will come back to me. Or I'm praying that this thing is going to happen. That's why I think we need to do another show on just divorce. You know what I mean? I remember putting it out, or somebody putting it out on Facebook about divorce and social media, and we were just so angry. People were so angry about divorce because the pastor or the therapist or would say, "Hey, listen, forget the therapy now. Leave the guy or leave the woman." This is something that we need to be able, again, Marlene, to be trained on, not just end it now, but we probably need to be dealing with social justice and go to our assemblymen and go to our senators and actually push for some of these things to be law. Because they are, I'm talking about for it to be mandatory, because people are dying every day. I don't know the stats on it. People are dying every day because the next door neighbor is tired of calling the police. They come 3 times, 4 times. I hate to go back over the O.J. Simpson thing, but how many times have they been over to the house? And even one time, they threw it away because it was O.J. You know what I mean? So come on, if I'm gonna just tell you right now, if my daughter was Cassie, you guys will be sending my quarterly.
We would be doing prison ministry with you. Let's go visit Cassie.
I'll be on the inside, yo.
You'd be Paul. I understand.
And singing and praying for the gates to break apart. And I'm just saying, I was so angry right here. But can I twist something really quick for everybody?
Yeah.
Let me just twist this real quick. I had to ask myself, we don't do enough introspection to ask ourselves, do we have enough anger inside of us? Do we have enough control? Do we have the control freak inside of us? Do we have the narcissism inside of us? Preachers, do we? Usually people with A-type personalities have that type of narcissism. We don't even know that it's narcissism. We just say, oh, we're great leaders, or we're great this. It's similar to each other. So when I saw that, could I have been the Diddy? Do you understand what I'm saying? Could my brother have been the Diddy? Could it be that our women, I'm going to say in this case, stayed with them because of the fame, because of the first lady, because of the first, the pastor's, the elder's wife, or the person? So many different reasons why they stay together. These are the things we need to be careful about. These are things
we need to be aware of the fact that, one of the solutions that many people have written articles on this is to have trusted sources. In other words, within the church, there needs to be trusted friends and family that can support an abuser. Sometimes we'll sit back and try to psychoanalyze the abuser. Will protect a person's reputation. Oh, we can't just call out a person. He's the president of that, or he's the elder here. We really don't have time for that.
58,000 incidents in Maryland since that.
We need to be ready to act immediately.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you have to strap on a gun and be the hero. No, I mean, you need to go on record that you've contacted the police captain in your neighborhood and say, I got a neighbor. He's beating up his wife a lot, and the kids are screaming, and there's just a lot of things. I mean, you could at least do that. Go to the police department and say, look, you guys need to be on alert for my neighbors. Okay. There was a PSA that was put out by the Advertising Council.
Oh, I remember. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Chuck.
we used to use that on our TV shows. And it was about a young couple. They were, preparing for bed. They, getting ready to turn. Neighbor upstairs in another apartment, they could hear the husband beating the wife and the wife screaming for her life. And while they were getting ready for bed, and of course what do? You turn out the lights. Instead of reaching for the phone and calling for some assistance, they simply turned the light out.
Yeah. You saw their hand going over to the phone. You thought it was going to the phone.
Right. And it was going to turn the light out. Yeah. And what that was saying is, well, the graphic at the end said, yes, it is your business. Because we get into this mindset, well, it's not my business, or it's someone that's famous. That has nothing to do with the urgency. Figure that part out later. Get the abused safe.
Yeah,
that's the most important part.
And I really want you to think, one of the things I appreciate about our podcast is being able to have a space where people can share their own stories and own experiences. So we asked at the beginning, why don't, the abused report? And I appreciate Hope for sharing that, her ex-husband threatened to shoot her if she left. So it's, in so many cases, not because they don't want to leave, but they actually, fearful for their life that if they leave, they won't die to the abuse, but more so from being shot. And also that fear of how am I going to survive with no money? Where am I going to go? And just feeling like your life is literally broken into so many pieces. I think
and that's why it's so important to have those trusted sources.
Yeah.
Friends and family. Call the family, if you're in an abusive relationship, call your relatives, call your brothers, call your sisters. If your parents are still living, explain to them what's going on, so that they're aware, because they can be ones to help protect you when you need to leave. And you say, oh, well, I don't have anywhere to go. Well, you can go to your brother's house. You can go to your mother's house. You can go to your friend's house who already knows your situation and is prepared to receive you and to support you.
Yeah, I wanted to see if there was any funding for people through the hotlines. Like, are there resources for people for their finances when they're in that type of a situation? Is it just physical safety, or is there some financial assistance that they can get? Maybe Daphne or Cerise can share as their counselors or therapists. They can share with us.
Yeah. I know some neighborhood protective groups they are actually prepared to come pick you up.
Yes.
In a vehicle.
Yes.
With, support. They're prepared to take you to a hotel and sign you into a hotel where it's safe and pay for it. And this is all, it's undisclosed so that the abuser won't know where you're going and who's taking care of you. So forth and so on. There are groups out there that are prepared. I personally know of someone who was actually taken care of to that extent.
Yeah.
So let's find out, as church members, as pastors, as churches, let's find out whose those agencies are. If we're not personally able to do it, let's find out who we can hand off to. But that person needs to feel like, oh, I'm safe. I'm in the hands of some people who love me, who's going to help and take care of me. They're going to protect me, so forth and so on. So many don't have that. They end up dying.
And I think too, just like we have that directory for the therapists, and I'm going to talk to our relationship ministries department about actually putting together a resource guide specifically for domestic violence in all of our areas, because I think that would be a great resource. And additional, something else I was thinking about what we can do as church people for you know how people have those events where like they wear the shirts that say, "Can I pray for you?" I feel like it would be great if every Sabbath someone had on a purple T-shirt that says, "I will believe you," or something like something.
I believe
that they know that's the person.
About to start something up in here.
Discreetly say something, you know.
Oh, you know, I could think of a lot of things you can put on a T-shirt, like "Need to talk."
Yeah, so because that's a fear too, that people don't feel like they're being believed. So if you have that, because when people say, "May I pray for you?" You believe that when you go to that person, you know, they're saying, "I'm going to pray." So maybe if we can kind of create a culture where there is someone identified,
something visible.
Man, it's crazy right
Yes.
there.
Yeah. So Cerise mentioned this. A part of abuse is isolation.
Yes, it is.
So you fracture the relationships between the abused and their friends, or the abused and their and there is no one to go to. But Latasha, if there's somebody with a big red glaring or big purple glaring sign that just says I'm here to help in some way capacity, right? Maybe that can be a subtle way to at least begin the thought process that I don't have to stay in this situation. I'm not stuck, right? And that's a large part of this of the issue that we have. And Marlena, that was a great question. Who's paying my phone bill?
Yeah.
How am I going to get to work, right?
And you gotta have a flip phone with not all of those dings and things in them, so that you have a source of communication that cannot be.
That's what the spies use. They have burners.
Yeah.
you need something, and there's a lot that goes into this entire process. As you know, another thing is we struggle to believe victims of abuse because in our mind, they have to be perfect. Every detail has to line up. We have to believe in their character. Is this a good person? Is this a person that's believable? It's they have the burden of proof most times before we act. And that's the unfortunate part. I think Sharice mentioned this, or somebody mentioned this in the comment section. People didn't believe Cassie. Even after she came out with the initial lawsuit, people didn't believe her.
That was Mezzo.
Okay, Mezzo. Okay, yeah. Because she didn't build up the cachet that Diddy did. People question her. Even after this latest video, there's somebody on a popular comedian podcast who said that she's not innocent either, because clearly she enjoys fighting.
Lord have mercy.
Wow. See?
Right?
She doesn't deserve to be abused that way.
Mix, there's also we could talk about this. Man, we can go hours on this, because there are also cultures that allow for, we call it domestic violence. They call it, if you don't beat me, you don't love me.
Right.
If you don't abuse me, you don't love me. And I know that it sounds crazy. I just remember 14, 15 years old, there was a movie that came out called The Burning Bed.
Oh yeah.
And it was like, I think they even have a law concerning it. And women started to, do what they got to do to survive.
Enough.
Yep.
Yeah, enough. Yeah.
Enough is just enough, from stabbing to whatever the case may be. They did whatever they had to do. So I just, again, I think it's all about education.
Yeah, I think it's really incumbent upon our church. This is our community. Not only our members, but our neighbors.
Yeah.
These are the people that God has set us out to protect. And let's look at it. Let's zoom out. You know me and my zooming out. The adversary is controlling all of this. And he's very sophisticated. He wants you to hesitate. He wants you to think, well, you want to think twice about outing somebody, you know, that may not be good. You know, the adversary wants to keep hold on that. I think we should educate ourselves. Our churches should, maybe even a seminar or two for all of the church members to know what to look for and to be prepared to help. You know, maybe your church doesn't have the resources or the wherewithal to have an immediate response to an urgent matter of abuse, but we should know who does.
Yeah, collaborate.
And we should do that in advance, not, oh, what should we do now? No, already know that if we come up with a situation like this in our church or our community, what would be a more powerful testimony to know that a person who's not an Adventist, but is in the neighborhood of an Adventist church, and they know they can go there and get help.
Chuck,
we should be ready for that.
What comes to mind as you're saying that? We have so many Adventist schools, right? Part of the issue is childcare. Well, we already have that figured out for most of our areas, right? So maybe we should have a fund set aside that will take care of tuition for a year as you're relocating to a different area, whatever the case may be, wherever the school may be. Maybe they need to go from Philly to Maryland to get away from that individual. Well, we have schools here provided for that.
Sure.
Right. A lot of our churches, you know, we have members that own homes, that own properties. Right. We should not that it's a public, you know, roster or the location should be
right,
but you know, a well-maintained and well-kept and, you know, private list of people, emergency contacts. Who will say, I will open up my home or open up, you know, an area in my home to house a mother with two kids, you know.
And you know, it would, you know, Miggs, it wouldn't hurt to go to your local police precinct, introduce yourself to the captain or the commanding officer.
That's right.
And say, I want you to tell me if I have a neighbor or a parishioner come to me with an urgent abuse matter, what can you do? Or what can you advise for us to do when it comes to law enforcement? When people dial 911, they want help and they want resolution. They don't want a police officer coming and say, oh, well, you know, this is not our lane. You know, if a police officer is standing there and there's a bloodied woman in front of them, not your lane, that's assault.
Right.
That's assault. So I would like to know from a police officer, you know, a commanding officer, if I come across this and I call you, what can I expect from you? Even if it's limited, what can I do with local social services? We're talking about urgent matters here. These aren't matters that, well, let's just pray about it and we'll talk to the people and maybe next week. No, there's no next week. There may never be a next week. We need to deal with it now. Deal with the counseling and the talking later.
Yeah. No, this is great. I know we got to wrap up today, but go ahead, Miguel.
I was going to say we have some excellent suggestions in the comment section. Chuck, excellent suggestion there. I'm going to reach out to a few of our police chiefs just to create the relationship and the conversation.
That's right.
Absolutely.
You know, so that we can be a part of that solution. So I just want to thank everyone for this.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Miggs, too, because you brought some important points up.
Yeah, and I know we have to close, and I don't want to belabor this, but one of the things I was thinking about, especially after watching that video, you know, most of us had a very visceral reaction to, you know, seeing Diddy kick her in her face. You know, it's like you're flinching, like you almost like you feel it. But the sad part about it, I was thinking about when we talked about the fact that there's an increase in violence in our middle schools and our high schools, is that there are children who will see that video and think it's cool, who want to be like Diddy and will see that and feel like this is what I have to do, or this is what people who are at that status and have that amount of power and money do. to, kind of boast it. And so I kind of wanted to bring that out because it's so important for us to educate our young people on what's appropriate and what's not. Because if someone has idolized him to that point, and sometimes they don't make the disconnect to say, this isn't good. They'll say, he has all this money. He has all this fame. He did this, and they don't, separate the two. And I just think it's important as we're raising our children and we're having these conversations with them earlier so that they can see the difference between, you don't have to, don't associate this with power and fame and this ability. Don't look at it as a badge of honor. I just wanted to throw that out before.
Let me just make a final statement, and this is in the context of our churches, in our families. If you haven't by now, I think it's time to have a conversation with your pastor, with your worship leaders, with your elders, and say, we must have a plan in place. Because I think that when you make that known, we have a safe, protective, confidential plan for you if you're abused. Watch how many people will stand up.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good.
This is a heavy one. So we've been scrolling at the bottom there, a hotline that has a lot of resources. Thank you, Cerise, for also putting some very specific links in the chat on Facebook for those who are looking for resources. Make sure you check all of those out. As we said, it's better to be prepared before you need it, or right now. We know some may be in the throes of it right now. And so the key is to get the help that you need, but also challenging our churches to be more of a haven and a resource for our members in the community in this regard. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to have this discussion outside of Domestic Violence Awareness Month, because we recognize that this is a daily struggle for people, and we want to bring it to the forefront as much as possible. So thank you, everyone, for the honest dialogue. Once again, our chat, once you have shown out with your comments and the resources that you've provided. So thank you as well. Thank you.
Indeed.
All right, guys. Well,
wow. What are we going to do to cheer us up? You know what? I'm just going to eat some,
just like they'll say, if you see something, say something. Okay. All right. But it's good to know that we've had this dialogue and that we're trying to sensitize people to care.
Right.
We can get so tied up with our personal business that we don't have time to care. We should care.
Yeah. And have this dialogue in your church. It doesn't have to stop here. Take the same conversation to your AY.
Absolutely. And please take my advice to go to your local law enforcement, maybe the district attorney's office, somewhere where you can get some foreknowledge. This is so important. It's a passionate subject of mine for various reasons we will not talk about. But if you do that, be aware and be prepared to help others. There are people afraid to ask for help, but let them know that you're there for them.
Yes.
And it's like a field of dreams. You build it, they will come.
True.
Okay.
All right.
You like that one, right, Mix? I told Chuck to say it.
We have this telepathy.
Yeah, it's just going on. It's going on, Chuck. It's going on.
All right, guys. Once again, thanks for the dialogue. We'll see you back here, same time, same place.
Great job, Biggs. Great job.
Hold on, because
that's right. You got the fan. Oh, put the fan up one more time, Mix. So these little fans, for those who are coming to camp meeting, those who are coming to camp meeting, we are trying to do a live show, maybe 2. So if you were there for camp meeting and you want to be part of our live audience, we'll have a fan for you until we run out. And so let us know if you're interested in being in our live audience or camp meeting. We'd love to interact with you face to face. Won't that be great?
Can I just show off my joint just one more time? This cup.
Show off the merch.
I want that cup.
You got it. So this cover is
cute.
Bomb right here. You got the cover on it. Like,
did we get it for a discount?
No. I'm a part of the up, and I had to pay for this thing. I mean, it's crazy, and I'm supposed to drink out of it. I'm putting like paper clips in it right now.
Cassie, did you put us in this arrangement on purpose?
Yes.
All the red shirts. Yeah. Okay. All right. That's right. Me and me. That's okay. We got our black and white. We're cool. Oh, and
Daphne said save for one. Save for one. Daphne said save for one because the stuff that we buy is also for.
We're raising some funds, and I was just thinking, since we're talking about domestic violence, maybe possibly looking into a shelter that we can donate to. We have the so I think that's a.
Can I throw out one right now?
Sure.
House of Ruth.
House of Ruth.
I was at Sharon Church. We were all connected to House of Ruth, but we used to do things like, we used to do things. We used to send them Pampers and all of that. It's still a women's shelter, but it's also domestic violence there too. So maybe we can concentrate on that.
Absolutely.
And I have another. How about Saving Grace?
You have one called Saving Grace?
We were starting a program. It's other kind of issues with women, but actually that name is called Her Name is Grace. That's what
okay.
Her name is Grace.
Wow, that sounds so you, Marlena.
Another little tip for you churches that are streaming: put a message on your live stream.
Yeah.
If you have a program, you have something. Just put it out there. You never know who will see that, and they will feel that is their salvation.
I know this is an original idea from me, but I think I like the purple shirts that says,
I believe you.
Gosh, I think you better hit that.
I know, right?
You gotta pass that. Get some thieves on the show, honey.
Well, this is documented.
I love that idea. No, but for real, I love that idea, and I think that will work. I love that idea.
Absolutely.
All right, guys. We can't get off of here, huh?
Aretha.
All right, thanks everybody.
Because of it's, you're supposed to say because of it.
No, because Sable doesn't like it.
Say.
I had to call you out, Sable. I love you though. All right, guys. See you next week. Same place.
We'll have a new